Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the best damn movie-related show on the planet Earth, the John Campea Show, coming to you from right here on my YouTube channel. I am, of course, your host, John Campea. It's an awesome honor and privilege, as it is every day, as we, a bunch of international friends, gather around the virtual water cooler, talking about our favorite things in the world, movies and movie news and all that sorts of good stuff. Oh, and man, there's some good stuff to talk about here today. And joining me to talk about said good stuff, he's back. He's the one and the only. He's Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett. Robert, how you doing, sir?
John, I am so good to be back here, and I got to tell you, I didn't know that White Walkers engaged in arts and crafts projects.
Well, you know, they are very creative people. It's very, you know, it's underrated how creative they can be. And we're going to talk about their creativity here just a little bit. And also joining us, somebody who I'm going to go out on a limb and guest watch Game of Thrones last night herself, Miss Ashley Whelan. Ashley, how you doing?
Yeah, no, I was too busy. Yeah, no. Obviously, I watched it. I was nerding out all day yesterday, reading and watching recaps, and I posted one on Twitter, and it was actually really helpful if you guys didn't get to go back and watch all of the seasons. But yeah, I feel like spring has arrived. I got new headphones, Game of Thrones. I'm just like very happy right now.
Wait, spring has arrived? I thought winter was here.
I know.
Winter is here. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. We will talk about that, but we got a few things to talk about here off the top. Let's get things started with this. Now, of course, Avengers Endgame is coming. I'm seeing it in 1 week. Avengers Endgame is coming. We're all super excited about it. And one of the many things we're all really excited about for Endgame is the fact that we are going to see Stan Lee, and again, another one of his cameos. Now, there has been some talk back and forth about when Stan Lee's last cameos. We knew he banked a bunch of cameos. Some of us, like myself, have been kind of going on the assumption that I thought I heard that he had shot a cameo for Spider-Man Far From Home. And I've kind of been operating under the assumption that the final cameo we would see Stan Lee is in Far From Home. However, the Russo brothers have now confirmed that Avengers Endgame will be the final cameo that we see Stan Lee in. Now, they weren't specific about whether or not they didn't record one for Far From Home, or whether they did and they've just decided that it's most appropriate for his final one to be in Endgame. They didn't clarify that a lot, but this is going to be his final one. Rob, we've already talked about how in Avengers Endgame, there's probably going to be a lot of cry time in this. You think this is going to add a little bit more oomph? Like once word gets out that this is the final one, that whenever his cameo does appear, is it going to add a little bit more emotional oomph at this point?
I think so. I mean, you know, the opening, how they changed the Marvel Studio logo on Captain Marvel to Stan Lee, even that got me pretty choked up. I wonder if they'll leave that for Endgame, but knowing that when we see Stan for the last time, I'm sure whatever they gave him was an epic send-off cameo. And I mean, even though they didn't know it was going to be, it's definitely going to be bittersweet. But I think it's fitting, John. I think that this is the end of their 22 film cycle. It's called now officially, the 22 films are called the Infinity Saga. And I think it's kind of fitting that Stan Lee's cameos will end with the Infinity Saga, because he's in the infinite now. He's moved on into infinity, and there's some kind of something poetic about it. I guess I wonder if he'll say something like Excelsior, you know, like one of his old catchphrases.
I'm still holding on. I think it was one of our viewers that suggested it once, and I've been kind of hooked on it ever since. I'm kind of holding on to this notion that his cameo will be the end of Endgame is going to be Tony and Pepper getting married, and Stan Lee is officiating the wedding. Oh my God, that would be such a good one. I will say this though. I agree with you that there is a poetic appropriateness for the final appearance to be Endgame. I agree. However, I will say this too. If they did bank a cameo for him for Spider-Man Far From Home, I mean, that would be one last chance to see him one more time. I kind of feel like if they did have that one in the bank, if he did record one for Far From Home, I think they should use it. Now, I completely agree with your reasoning, and it's hard to argue against it. So I'm not feeling super strong one way or the other, but I kind of lean towards that, man, if they've got one more, then damn it, use one more. But I don't. So let's say for an argument's sake here, Robert, that they do have one banked for Far From Home, and we don't know that they do. But if they did, and you're in charge. Bob Iger calls you, as he does every afternoon, and says, Rob, do we use that last one, or do we just nice and clean end his appearances with Endgame? What do you suggest to him that they do?
Well, if there was one last one, John, it's Spider-Man. And if for any other hero, I might say, but Spider-Man was so... I mean, all the Marvel characters are unique, but there's something about Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility. I think they should use it. If they've got it, they should use it.
I agree. All right, let's move on to the next thing off the top before we get to our main topics. And I don't know if any of you heard, there was a minor blip in the television landscape last night. Some TV show returned finally after 595 days off air. We finally got a new episode, ladies and gentlemen, of Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones, of course, returned last night to all of its glory. A brand new opening sequence, of course, showing the break in the wall and all that kind of stuff. I like the opening sequence quite a bit. Rob, you and I haven't had a chance to talk about it yet. Even off air, we said, let's not talk about it. Let's not talk about it. I want to know, was it worth the 595-day wait? How did you enjoy last night's Game of Thrones episode?
Well, look, first of all, let me just say, I understand it was moving all of the pieces around the board and setting them up to strike and be striked. I loved it. I thought it was exactly what I wanted to get from this first episode. I think the episode was called Winterfell, and we got to see everybody come back. I loved how Bran Stark has become like the silent judger of everybody, and everybody has to kind of go talk about a gatekeeper. Bran Stark has become the ultimate three-eyed gatekeeper, just quietly looking at everybody. But I really enjoyed all of the different reunions of the show. I loved seeing Sansa and Tyrion seeing each other for the first time since Joffrey's wedding. And I loved seeing everybody come together and talk. I loved seeing Arya see Jon.
Yeah, that's a great moment.
I thought that was all great. And I did like seeing, even though it was a little goofy. I mean, our last best movie, worst movie was about rom-coms, and there was Flying the Dragons Together was a little rom-comish, I must say.
I dug it though. I thought it was a great scene.
I loved it, but it needed to happen. It's interesting. All of the things that they needed to have happen sort of happened. And now it's like, okay, here's all the reunions. Everybody's in place. Now we can start these next 5 episodes. We're off to the races. I just really enjoyed it. I loved even seeing Theon and what's her Greyjoy and Yara Greyjoy sort of make peace and go off to do what they're going to do. I like that. I like when he busted in and rescued her, which is a far cry from where he was when we saw her taken by Euron.
And how she hit him, and then he got and then let him up.
Yeah.
So appropriate. So appropriate. Yeah. Ashley, you had a chance to watch the episode last night. How did you enjoy it?
I mean, I loved it. Felt like Christmas. Exactly what Rob was saying. It's like I knew they were gonna have to set up a ton of stuff. I wasn't expecting like a battle in the first episode. So I thought it was great. I thought and they dropped like huge plot points like immediately when Sam told John. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening episode 1. So
right.
I loved it.
There's a lot of humor in it too. Like I like the line he's like the blue eyes, he's like,
oh my God,
I've always had blue eyes.
He's got blue eyes.
I also really like the scene where Dany told Sam that she executed his father and brother. That acting that he was doing was unbelievable. I couldn't believe his performance. I was just sitting there going, oh my God.
That was 2 different reactions. The reaction first hearing about his dad, and then the subtle difference between his reaction to that and his reaction to the death of his brother. It was fabulous. I'll tell you guys what, no holds barred. I freaking loved this episode. This might be, out of the 70 plus they've had, this might be a top 5 episode for me of Game of Thrones. And I'll tell you why. Because, look, any show can have, ooh, cling, 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 sword fights, and ooh, look, there's monsters. Any show can do that. any show can make Battle of the Bastards. What made Battle of the Bastards was the fact of all the character dynamic and drama that went into it, that when you come to Battle of the Bastards, it is emotionally engaging. You are completely riveted because of all that stuff. And when you get an episode like this one, now granted, you were saying, Ash, that we weren't expecting some big confrontation, some big battle in the first episode. But what this episode did was it just soaked in the character dynamics. It soaked in the character drama. We had Jon seeing Arya again. We had Jon seeing Bran. We had Tyrion and Sansa seeing each other. We had everything going on, all the drama unfolding in the Iron Throne room. We had everything that's going on with Cersei. We had, we had Reek rescuing his sister. We had so much happened in this. And then, of course, Sam and John confronting each other, because there was a bunch of us watching it here at my place last night. And I remember, even in the first 5 minutes, we're all like, don't put this off. Don't put this off. Like, as Bran says at the beginning, we've got to tell him. We've got to tell him. So you better not wait until episode 3. And then they did it. And they did it perfectly. And I love Samwise Gamgee and the way he addressed that whole thing, that immediately...
Samwise Gamgee?
Isn't he the Samwise Gamgee of this show?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Is Sam not the Samwise Gamgee of this show? I mean, it really is. So Samwise tells John, his Frodo, he says, you're the true king, blah, blah, blah. He's like, you're telling me my father lied to you? And instantly he was the voice of reason. He loved you, and he swore to his sister to protect you, and Robert Baratheon would have killed you like that. He had to do it. So I love the fact, because a lot of times in these shows, we see these conversations happen, but the common sense thing is never said, that we as audience members are screaming at the TV. And Sam stepped in and said the common sense thing. He said, he loved you. He had to protect you. They would have killed you if anybody knew for a second who you really were. And what I loved about it is he's still a Stark. His mother is a Stark. He's still a Stark. And he's a Targaryen and all this kind of stuff. But I'll tell you what, guys, beyond a shadow of a doubt to me, the ultimate moment of this episode, they saved for last. As Jaime rides into Winterfell. And I'm expecting, as he pulls his, I thought it was him when we saw the cloaked figure, because he hasn't showed up yet. So he pulls the cloak down, and there he is, looking a little more ragged, a little darker, the hair, whatever. And I'm thinking, oh, he's going to see his brother. Or, oh, he's going to see Dany, and what's going to happen there? I wasn't even thinking about Bran. I wasn't even thinking about it. And he gets off his horse, turns, and there's Bran sitting there like a boss. Just sitting there looking at him, almost like, sup? Like, oh my God, and nothing was said. See, again, this underlines, I'm not even the biggest Game of Thrones fan in the world. I can't recite all the names or anything like this, but this is what I appreciate about this show so much. They have cultivated and nourished and grown and saturated the character drama so much that all they needed to give us a huge impact moment was a dude getting off a horse, looking across the street and seeing a kid in a wheelchair, and it made me freak the hell out. I just soaked in this, and I saw some people online kind of complaining about this episode. I'm like, what in the flying F are you talking about? This was, to me, this was Game of Thrones at its best. I loved it. I ate it up. They had all those reunions, all those confrontations, all that. Just, it was glorious. And I'll tell you what else. All this groundwork they're laying right now, when we get to the Battle of Winterfell, it's all going to pay off. It's going to pay off in spades. Oh, and one other thing that I became very, very sure about, very solidified in, is this. Daenerys Targaryen is a jerk. Oh my God, she's a jerk face. I hate this character so much, and I love hating this character. Like, I love that she's there because I love hating this character. Look, on the line of good guy or bad guy, she's clearly a good guy. But oh my God, she is a jerk. Oh my God, she is a jerk. Whether it's the stuff like, you got Sansa, Lady of Winterfell, sitting there talking about how, look, this is all kind of new to us. I'm not comfortable with this. And by the way, how the hell are we going to feed everybody? And what do dragons eat? And she's got to be the show off. Whatever they want. Shut up. Anyway, and then later on, like, just talking to Sam, it's just like, Yeah, I gave your father a chance to bend the knee. He didn't. I killed him. Oh, and your brother too, by the way. You need to go and take some time. I was like, jerk. She's a jerk. I love that she's in the show, but she's a jerk. Anyway, so I don't know.
There was one other moment that I really, really liked, and that's when Tormund, Barrack, and Dolores find the zombie kid.
Oh,
in the mandala of severed arms, because that harked back to the first episode of Game of Thrones in the first season, and what I really liked about that is the Night's King was sending a message. Yep. So if they're sending a message, there's more going on. I mean, I've always thought of them as, in the way they've been portrayed in the show, occasionally they'll show glimpses of intelligence, like taking out the dragon. But it seemed to me like they're just kind of like a storm, like a hurricane or a tornado that's just going to roll over everyone. But like the Cylons, they have a plan. They were making a statement. What is that statement? I don't know. But they took the time to do a Hannibal Lecter-esque, a Mads Mikkelsen arts and crafts project and leave it on the wall. I thought that was a great moment, seeing the three of those guys come together. They're behind the White Walkers, so can they get to Winterfell before the shit goes down? But then that was really creepy when the eyes opened and the kid was actually alive.
Oh,
man, I thought it was like a little, like at first my friends and I were like, is it kind of like a swastika? And then they're like, quick, add more arms, add more arms. Cause like the pattern, I was like, that's interesting. But can we just talk about Gendry? Cause I feel like he's like the silent killer here in this show. I'm like,
everybody forgets about him. He's the real heir to the throne.
Yes. I'm like, what is going to happen with this guy? Is he going to be on the throne at the end, or is it John? I mean, you've read all the books. Like, who actually is?
They've never,
but they've never caught up. The show is now ahead of the books.
Yes.
Arya and him are going to hook up. Then he dies. She's going to end up on the Iron Throne. There we go. Arya ends up on the Iron Throne.
I'm interested right now. I'm like invested, and I care about every single character that's left. So, I mean, just seeing them on screen again made me excited, and the whole build up. And yeah, Cersei. I mean, she's unhinged. Something has got to.
She's
click
broke,
with that woman soon.
I think this, Robin. I'm curious to know what you think about this. We talked about this last night, but I think the White Walker part of this story comes to an end in the Battle of Winterfell. I think that's where this ends in 2 weeks. And then the remaining episodes are about the Iron Throne. The last 2 or 3 episodes are going to be about the Iron Throne. So, do you think the White Walker thing goes right through to the end?
No, I mean, if it does go to the end, it's going to be more like the White Walker threat to me is not what the show, like you said, has been about. Right. What's been going on is what this threat is going to do is rally the troops behind someone, whether that's Jon Snow, whether that's Daenerys. Look, I think it's apparent to me, at least, that Daenerys is not long for the world, and I don't think, because like you said, she's not a good leader. She doesn't inspire enough people, and at the end of the day, she's got too many enemies, namely Sansa Stark. Somebody, I think Rolling Stone in one of their recaps said there was enough side eye from Sansa in this episode to make memes for the next 20 years. And I love that. I love what they've done with Sansa. I mean, she was brutalized by Ramsay Bolton. I mean, she's put up with a lot of shit since she was sent to King's Landing in the first episode with her father. And she deserves, I mean, she's a real badass. And remember, she brought in the troops and saved John's ass at the Battle of the Bastards. I mean, she's earned her place. If anyone's a queen or has been groomed to be a queen, I think it's Sansa, but who knows?
I love that Arya even said she's the smartest girl I know.
She's smartest person I know. But my favorite line in the show, and why this dude's a true king. He's got everybody pissed off at him, including the biggest badass in this show, which is little Lady Mormont. Like that little girl. I mean, she just blew me away in previous episodes, and then she stands up again and gets right in Snow's face, like gets right in John's face. I love this kid, but then he stands up and says, "I had a choice: protect my crown or protect the North, and I choose the North." I'm like, king. That's a king. That is a king right there. Anyway, I got excited. Anyway, we could talk about this all day, but we cannot. We have to move on. We got a whole bunch of other stuff to talk about here today. And speaking of which, guys, We got some main topics to get through here today. How do we select our main topics here on the John Campea Show? It's really rather simple. You see, you guys select them by going to the website, www.thejohncampeashow.com/contact. Fill out the form, submit your topic or question, and maybe you'll see your topic as one of our main issues here on the John Campea Show. With that down and out of the way, Ashley, what is our first main topic today?
First one up today is from Muzamil Shaikh. Although I personally have no problem with staying in my seat for the entirety of Endgame, do you think theater chains should reduce the number of trailers behind it? The usual is 20 minutes. I personally think they should just limit it to a few Disney previews like Lion King, Rise of Skywalker, Frozen, Aladdin, and maybe throw in Far From Home. 10 minutes and start the movie. Would love to hear your point of view on this.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, that look, again, one of the big topics of conversation lately has been about the runtime of the movie, of Endgame and stuff like that, 3 hours, and some people suggesting, well, maybe what the theater should do is limit for this long movie the number of trailers they show. Here's the problem. Movie theaters make money off those trailers that they show. And what the movie theaters are going to say, and I understand, what the movie theaters are going to say, that's not our problem. Like if Marvel puts out a movie that is 3 hours long, we, the movie theater owners, should not be the one to suffer by reducing the amount of money we're able to make on the trailers that we show and all that kind of stuff. That's not our problem. Why make it our problem? So I simply don't see that happening. Now, look, I've said for a while now, Rob, that I have a very firm belief that this whole thing about the 25, because it's not 20 minutes, my friend. It's like 25 minutes and sometimes a little bit north of that. It used to be 20. It used to be 15. Now they run these freaking pre-shows for like 25 minutes. They do need to get this under control. This has got to be changed. Somehow, some way, it's got to be wrangled in a little bit. But that being said, when it comes to a movie with a runtime of, like, say, 3 hours with Endgame, there's no reason that we should say, oh, well, the ones that should take the consequences of this is the theater itself. They're the ones who should take the consequences. Because the theater's just going to look at us and say, well, why is this our problem? This is not our problem. We're showing our trailers. The studio can make the movie long or short. That's fine. But we're going to have our trailers. I just don't see any way around that. Rob, how do you approach that? How would you answer that question?
Well, I think, first of all, it's not like you pointed out, it's not the theater's responsibility to take care of their patrons beyond showing a great movie with great sound and picture and providing nice refreshments. Knowing, I mean, it's like everything else. We know the movie's 3 hours and 2 minutes long. I think it's up to you. Do you want to sit there and drink a giant, large Diet Coke, which is what I like to get, or do you want to be responsible and maybe duck out for one of the credits or two, not credits, trailers, one of the trailers or two of the trailers, miss the trailers, knowing when the movie's going to start? You're not going to know exactly, but take care of your business. And then don't expect to drink a large drink for 3 hours. You gotta plan accordingly. There's nothing wrong with planning accordingly. It's like being in the military. This has got to be a strike with military precision. You have to be in your seat. You've got to be zen about it. You got to be ready to go. You got to be prepared to let it wash over you. This is the culmination of 22 movies. You need to man up or woman up or gentle people up, whatever you do, and stick it out. Get ready for that end game. You too must be like the Avengers themselves, taking on the burden of the universe.
I don't see how that applies to the trailer. I mean, because you can just go to the bathroom during the last trailer. I'm not sure how any of that has to do with the question. But I mean, bottom line though is I don't think it's the theater's responsibility.
No.
Like if the studios decide to make a longer movie, that's fine, but it's not the theater's responsibility to say, well, then we have to take on the burden of that and we have to reduce the number of I think they need to reduce the number of trailers generally across the board. But if what your standard right now is that 20 to 25, it's not their job to shorten that up. So, anyway,
but I think, John, I think they're going to probably do that anyway, because imagine if you could fit 3 or even 4 shows of Endgame in with all those trailers. They could probably get a 5th show if they didn't play as many trailers, depending on how late they're going to stay.
They've got contractual obligations for those trailers, so they can't get out of that. So it creates a little bit of a conundrum. So everybody's looking for ways to shorten this experience up just a little bit. We'll see it only less than 2 weeks, guys. Less than 2 weeks till it hits theaters. All right. What is our next main topic of the day?
All right. Next up is from Terry Gundapson. Hey, John. Okay. We now have a title for Star Wars Episode 9, and it is The Rise of Skywalker. I've heard you mention a bunch of possible theories as to who or what the title is referring to, but I wanted to ask, now that you've had a few days to think about it, what are the most likely possibilities?
Yeah, so obviously on Friday, the big panel happens at Star Wars Celebration. They have the Star Wars Episode 9, and as expected, they ended it by showing the teaser trailer for the new movie. Of course, with the fantastic ending of the Emperor's voice laughing. The lights come up on stage. Ian McDiarmid himself is standing there and says, "Roll it again." And then they play the trailer again. It's a great moment. But the big conversation piece that's been running around is, all right, the title's Rise of Skywalker. What is this referring to? What's the Skywalker? And there have been several big theories that have been bantied around. First of all, there have been dozens and dozens of theories. Here are the ones that seem to rise to the top. One of them, and these are in no particular order. One is that it's a reference to Luke Skywalker, that Luke himself returns. Okay, that's one. Unlikely, but one. Two, it's a reference to Leia, that Leia's rise to prominence and becoming the new chancellor of a brand new republic, the reestablished republic by the end of the film. I think unlikely, but that's a possibility. Another one is that it's a reference to the redemption of Kylo Ren, that Kylo Ren rejects the dark side, re-embraces the light, all that kind of stuff, has his redemption arc. A lot of people don't, including myself, don't think that's in the cards for Kylo. Kylo had his opportunity to have a redemption arc. He rejected them. He actually doubled down on his dark side path a number of times. So I don't think it's happening, but that is one of the predominant theories and certainly is a possibility. Another one is a reference to Rey. Some people thinking that maybe J.J. Abrams will retcon his own thing of saying Rey is not actually descended from anybody. So that's one. But a lot of people seem to think that Rey will adopt the name of Skywalker. Because one of the things that J.J. Abrams said during the panel was that there has been a chunk of time that has passed between the end of Episode 8 and the beginning of Episode 9. They wouldn't specify how much time. He just said a good amount of time has passed between the end of Episode 8 and the beginning of Episode 9. In that time, she's probably forged a relationship, not just deepening her understanding by reading the Jedi texts and all that kind of stuff, but also probably deepening her relationship with Leia, and then maybe by the end, in honor to her and to Luke himself, adopting the name of Skywalker. That's a possibility as well. One of the other possibilities that I find myself most attracted to is the notion that it might be a reference to Anakin Skywalker. That when you look at this 9-film saga as a Skywalker saga, as one big story, this whole thing began with Anakin Skywalker. That's where it really began. And there's been stuff in the extended material suggesting that Palpatine is the one who caused Anakin Skywalker to come into existence, that he's the one who manipulated the Force and the midichlorians to conceive Anakin Skywalker to be born, all that kind of stuff. So if you're bringing the Emperor back in, it could stand to reason that we're talking full circle about that Rise of Skywalker is not a reference to something that's happening now, but rather a reference to it being revealed how Anakin Skywalker rose in the first place. That's another theory. Now, there are problems with every single one of these theories, and there's problems with others. And by the way, another big popular one that I think has a lot of possibility to it is the notion that no more Jedi, no more whatever, moving forward, Force users will adopt the moniker of Skywalkers. That Force users moving forward are Skywalkers. And it's interesting to note that, as my friend Kevin pointed out to me, that in the earliest drafts of the Star Wars story that George Lucas wrote, the kid's name wasn't Luke Skywalker. Skywalkers were what the Force users were called, actually in George's earliest writings. That these people who use the Force, they're known as Skywalkers. So that ties into that theory a little bit here as well. Rob, you've probably heard dozens and dozens and dozens of theories regarding, in just a couple of days, regarding, in this title, Rise of Skywalker, what the hell is that referencing? What to you are some of the more prominent ones that you think have the greatest possibility of maybe panning out?
Well, I think the last one you addressed. I mean, there's a reason why it's the Rise of Skywalker as a idea. That's what I think. I think all the characters you just showed, I mean, Rey not so much, but Kylo, Leia, Anakin, Luke, they all played a part in shaping the galaxy. And if indeed we finally see balance brought to the Force, then the notion of this idea that the Skywalker clan has shaped the galaxy over huge events, you know, the rise of the Empire, Skywalker's played a part, the beginning of the rebellion and the instigation of the rebellion, the destruction of the first Death Star, Skywalker's played a part. Luke and Leia together were able to get the first Death Star destroyed. So I think that the notion that the galaxy is going to embrace the name Skywalker, as it was a process, billions of people lost their lives, but it was the Skywalker clan collectively through all of these machinations that finally, in my mind, bring this balance to the galaxy, then allowing the idea that all Force users become Skywalkers, or there's no longer the Sith and the Jedi, but there is only Skywalkers. I mean, I think that notion is a really interesting one, and I think they're going to go, at least the rise of Skywalker makes sense to me if you think about it as an ideal, as a you know, these are powerful forces that have shaped the galaxy, and they're taken on as a moniker of Force users everywhere to hopefully, now that there's balance in the Force, that we can move forward in peace. Although, who's really at peace in a franchise called Star Wars?
And it only lasts for so long, as we found out from Return of the Jedi. All right, guys, well, listen, we want to know, what right now is your theory? What do you think the rise of Skywalker is referring to? Jump down to the comment section below and leave us your thoughts. All right, with that down, let's move on to the next main topic today. Ashley, what is our next main topic today?
Next up is from Brian Pfeiffer. Many of my friends were unable to purchase tickets opening weekend due to a 3-hour showtime, NFL draft, and other reasons. I know many people are waiting until week 2 to see Avengers Endgame. Although Endgame may not break box office records opening weekend, what are the chances it breaks records in week 2? I think there's a good chance Endgame will have one of the smallest second weekend percent drops for any superhero movie thus far. Thoughts?
Well, my first thought is this. Endgame's going to break the opening weekend box office record. I mean, Endgame's going to beat the opening weekend box office record. Now, again, there are some people who say there are problems with that. And just to recap the math of that, it's not the craziest thing in the world to suggest that maybe it won't. There was a great article in Variety that basically broke down the math on it and says, here's the challenges that Endgame's face. Now, Infinity War was one of the biggest wide release films of all time, all right? It opened on 4,500 screens. At 3 hours, the way they broke down the math was that on average, they're going to be able to have one less screening per day per screen because of the length of the movie, right? So at 4,500 screens, that equals to about 4,500 less screenings per day. The average movie theater size is 250 seats, many much bigger, some much smaller. 250 seats multiplied by 4,500 screenings is like 1.1 million fewer tickets available per day. You extrapolate that over a couple of days, now you've got 2.2, almost 2.3 million fewer tickets available per day. At the average of $10 movie ticket, which is the national average, at 2.2 million seats, that's over $22 million in box office that's not going to be available to Endgame that was available to Infinity War. All that being said, I still think Endgame is going to pretty comfortably beat the opening weekend record. I still believe it's going to probably pretty comfortably beat the opening weekend record. I still don't think 300 is in the ballpark. I don't think 300 is on the table, but I think it's going to beat that record and beat it pretty comfortably. But Rob, when we start talking about second weekend drop-off for this thing, there's a couple of big things that come into play here. Number one is the quality of the movie. Like, right. Again, we don't know how good or bad the movie is. We're assuming it's going to be awesome, but everybody has a bad day at the office. Maybe this is, their bad day at the office. Who knows? But the other thing is this, and this is something that you and I have pointed out a lot of times, and it's really going to come into play here. The more people that run out to see a movie opening weekend, the more of a drop you're going to have in week 2. I mean, sometimes if a movie sucks, you're going to get a big drop. Like we've seen some terrible movies that have a 70+% drop from week 1 to week 2. Even if that's not the case here, even if Endgame is really good,
right,
you're still going to get around a 50% or more drop simply because week 1 is going to be so big. And like we've talked about this a lot lately about more and more our movie-going culture is gravitating more and more towards seeing movies opening weekend. That seems to be when more and more people are going opening weekend, which means the more people that go opening weekend, the more people who have already seen it by the time weekend number 2 comes around. Now you're going to get repeat showings and all that kind of stuff. So I'll tell you what, I think Avengers Endgame is going to have a record-setting second weekend box office, but not when it comes to percentage drop. I think it's going to make like $130 million second weekend, which will be a new record for most money made on a second weekend. But I think its percentage drop is still going to be 50% plus just because so many people are going to see it. So no, I don't think you're going to see any kind of new record for smallest percentage drop from week 1 to week 2, simply because the sheer size of the numbers. Rob, what do you think? Do you think that it can still do that, or do you see it the same way I do?
I pretty much see it the same way you do. Look, it's going to shatter all box office records for opening weekend. It probably is well on the way to already doing that with the pre-sales because they haven't stopped. You know, there's probably just people are still stacking up those showings throughout the first week. And it all really comes down to how good the movie is.
Yeah.
If this movie delivers Return of the King style fulfillment, and it really does give us those character moments, and it really is that emotional, and it really does give us a climax where your jaw's slack-jawed hanging on the ground. You have to pick it up when the lights come up. If it gives us that kind of entertainment, who knows how much this movie is going to make? Because everybody in the world's going to go see it. Everybody with kids is going to have to drag their kids to see it. I mean, it's going to be a huge, huge deal. And again, the running time is always going to be a factor. And the amount of venues are going to be a factor. It's not like there's suddenly 5,000 more theaters across this great nation where they can go and see more showtimes. So it is limited by the number of, well, the actual minutes long it is. But I just think that this is a cultural event like we haven't seen in the movies, maybe since Return of the King. And I think everyone's going to go. I think it's probably going to have a record-setting second weekend, like you said, and maybe even a third and fourth. The movie's good. It's going to have staying power, but I don't think the NFL draft plays into whether people are going to go see this movie or not. You know, I think people are going. I think this is a cultural event, the likes which we haven't seen in a very long time. And like I was saying, Captain Marvel is going to have the untapped female audience. You've got whole families. This is an event, man. This is a big deal for moviegoers around the world. I mean, everyone's excited about it. The Avengers, they have such goodwill. People love these characters. You have kids. We've heard from kids on this show that have grown up with it, that went from seeing a movie, their first comic book movie at 8. Now they're in college. They're going to take their friends. I mean, this film is not like a regular movie. I think this movie's got an incredible wave, a surge behind it, and we're going to see box office like we've never seen before. But I like you think, like you said, I'm sure someone says, well, if it doesn't shatter every box office record, it's somehow not as successful as it was supposed to be. And that's we're going to get that. We're going to get people saying that. If the movie isn't good, if the movie isn't good, that's the only way it's not going to become the most successful movie. I'm not going to say it's shattering Avatar, but it has a shot. And I think this movie. I don't think it has. I don't think it has the remotest shot at Avatar, but it's got. I believe it's got a shot at Titanic. I think it can pass Titanic. For sure. I'm thinking 2.5 billion.
Whew. But even at 2.5 billion, you're over $200 million away from Avatar, right? So
I know.
I think we are going to see this. I think at the end of the day, we're going to see the second biggest film of all time. I think it's going to pass Infinity War, then it's going to pass The Force Awakens, and I do think it's going to pass Titanic, and then it'll fall somewhere between that 2.15 and that 2.7 gap between Avatar. How close or how far, we'll see. But I think I agree with you. I think it's going to end up in that kind of area in there somewhere. All right, guys.
Unless it's incredible and incredibly satisfying, and you have to see it again.
I don't know, because I mean, people felt that way about Infinity War, and it didn't catch Titanic. And people loved Infinity War, and we did go back time and time again. So I mean, once you get north of 2 billion, well, first of all, once you get to 1 billion, that's an incredible number. But once you get into this uncharted territory of north of 2 billion, I mean, it ain't just math. I mean, we're talking about some astronomical numbers, because you're talking about like Infinity War out last year with the beginning of the culmination of the MCU, and the movie was beloved and loved, and people loved it, and the snap and all that kind of stuff. And people went back, and it made $2 billion.
Insanity.
It's nuts. These numbers are astronomical. All right, guys, what do you think about all this? Jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. All right, let's now move on to the fourth email today. What's next?
I was thinking that we need to get this man a chalkboard. I mean, that was impressive. I'm like, he needs a dry erase board behind him. Next up is Mike Tremblay. Mandalorian. I watched the Star Wars Celebration panel for the Mandalorian online, and even saw the footage and behind the scenes stuff they showed. It looks amazing. Could this show be the ultimate game changer for Disney Plus and make everyone flock to the new service?
I'll tell you what, I don't know. Like, on one of my open mics yesterday, I went down through, because everybody's just kind of discounting Netflix at this point. And I went through a list of like 20 big, popular, wonderful, original shows on Netflix that are still going to be there when Disney Plus launches. And my whole thing is like, guys, make no mistake, even when Disney Plus launches, Netflix is still the big boy on the block when it comes to this ecosphere. And they have an impressive lineup of series. Not so impressive with their original movies, but their original series, impressive. Okay, so that being said, there was nothing they could have done better than launching Disney Plus with The Mandalorian. There is no better move they could have possibly made than to come out of the gates and say, on the day this thing launches, we're going to have all these Star Wars movies, we're going to have all these Marvel movies, we're going to have 30 seasons of The Simpsons, we're going to have all these Pixar films, the Disney Vault is going to be opened up now permanently, all the 500 classic Disney pieces of property, and all of it is good. But to say, day one, when this thing goes online, the first ever live action Star Wars series starring Pedro Pascal called The Mandalorian, a gritty, the good, the bad, and the ugly kind of feeling story set with a lone gunfighter set in the Star Wars universe on the outskirts of the galaxy. There is nothing they could have done. No one-shot thing they could have added more, but to me, there's no one-shot thing they could have done that would have gotten more people interested in that first weekend. I mean, honestly, I think even more than, obviously, if you said, we're going to launch this service with Avengers 5, okay, that would be a difference. But I don't even think you could have launched this thing with a Loki series and gotten more interested than The Mandalorian. I don't think you could have launched this thing with WandaVision and gotten more interest than The Mandalorian. I really think this was a key piece of their puzzle, and I think it was a brilliant part. Now, again, this thing is not going to launch bigger than Netflix, Rob. I just don't see any way that's just not going to happen. Netflix is still the big kid on the block, but this is going to take them a long way. And I'll tell you what, Rob, I saw this Mandalorian behind the scenes stuff. The panel was completely different than the Star Wars Episode 9 panel. The Star Wars Episode 9 panel was awkward. It lacked life. I mean, there's a great moment with Billy D. Williams saying, "Lando's been with me the whole time." That was great. The great reception Kelly Marine Tran got, all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, it was kind of lifeless, awkward, whatever. The Mandalorian panel was different. It had energy, it had excitement, which was really, really great to see. And this behind the scenes footage stuff has just gotten me more and more excited. I think this looks spectacular. I think launching the service with this show is a great idea. How do you see it?
Dude, I mean,
I love it when you start your sentences just with "dude."
I just think that my man Bob Iger, you know, I missed our squash game yesterday. I don't think that there is a better business decision, perhaps in the history of entertainment, than to launch this streaming service with The Mandalorian. And looking at how the creative team, first of all, 2 words, Carl Weathers. I mean, come on. It's seeing Carl Weathers in Star Wars garb. I felt like I was seeing an old friend come home that I didn't even know how much I missed. You know, and the casting choices are incredible. The directors they've got. But what I was so excited about was the design, how we're getting a bunch of new spaceships and new things like parked next to a sand crawler, you know, and they're showing us the familiar and yet giving us a bunch of new stuff. And I think that was a big mistake that the JJ era of Star Wars made. It's like, no, we're not really going to give you anything new. We're going to give you TIE fighters and X-Wings again and Star Destroyers. You know, one of the great things as a kid growing up, when you first saw Imperial Walkers after seeing Star Wars, you were like, what? Snow speeders? I mean, as a kid, you wanted all that cool new hardware so you could build the models and play with the toys and get excited about it. And The Mandalorian looks like the kind of Star Wars that I was jazzed about when I first saw the trailer for Empire Strikes Back when I was a kid. All that stuff, the behind the scenes, that I watched it. I know somebody illegally recorded it, but you know what? I wasn't there, and I felt like a Star Wars fan. I was obligated to do so, so sue me. But I was so excited what they showed. I mean, it's like, here are people that finally understand exactly what the audience wants from Star Wars. They got Dave Filoni making his live-action directing debut. The Mandalorian armor looks badass. They're talking about making it, you know, as soon as they said Sergio Leone, the man with no name, good, the bad, and the ugly, I'm like, come on. Everything about this seems so dead on. I cannot wait. I am so excited for this. I can't even tell you.
And one of the great things about it, too, is it continues on kind of what they did in The Force Awakens, when JJ used to talk about how Star Wars needs to feel like the lived-in universe. It's got to be dirty. It's got to be, you know, it's got to have elements of that. Yes, you're going to have your kind of clean, polished, futuristic stuff, but it's also got to have that lived-in feel. And watching all this stuff with The Mandalorian, it had that. It had that gritty, lived-in feel. It's definitely, it's a Western in space. I feel like this is going to be their version of Logan. That's what I kind of feel like a little bit. I feel like it's going to be their version of Logan. And it's going to be great. Oh my God, it's going to be so good. I cannot wait. All right, let's move on now to our final main topic of the day. Ashley, what's our final main topic today?
All right, you guys, last one up is from Cameron Moore. Return of the King clocked in at 200 minutes, while Endgame is 182 minutes. I know there wasn't social media channels to express frustration in no intermission, but were there any complaints in the length of the Lord of the Rings films? I wonder if Lord of the Rings is based on source materials, while Endgame is not, is a reason why. No one knows what is going to happen in the Avengers.
I think one of the questions that have been coming around a lot lately that I've been hearing is, why are people complaining about Endgame runtime, but no one ever complained about Titanic's runtime, and no one complained about the Lord of the Rings runtime? And I think you nailed something right on the head there when you mentioned, okay, so there wasn't social media at the time. I mean, that's it right there, because that's where it stops. If you don't think, or if you don't remember that there was a good amount of complaining about the runtime of the Lord of the Rings films when they were first coming out, and some people murmuring stuff like that, then you're rewriting history, because they did. They absolutely did. But there wasn't the social media to get around and talk about all that kind of stuff. Now, somebody recently asked me on one of my open mics, they said, you know, I don't remember people complaining about the runtime of Titanic. And here's why I think this is the big difference. Why I think you're seeing so much discussion going around about the runtime of Endgame, which is like a good full 20 minutes longer than the previous longest MCU movie. I think the reason you're hearing more people talk about this is this one thing. When you went to go see Titanic, you understood, okay, it's a really freaking long movie. Okay, I'll just go to the bathroom when I need to go to the bathroom. You didn't care when you went to go see Titanic, as good of a movie as it is, and it's a real good movie. You didn't care. You just know at some point you got to get up and go to the bathroom. You're just going to get up and go to the bathroom. No big deal. And you'll miss a minute or two of the movie. Not a big deal. The difference here is nobody wants to miss a bloody second of Endgame. Like even in the Lord of the Rings movies, there are people like, I mean, obviously some of the greatest films ever made. But we all just knew when you got to go, you got to go. You got to get up and you got to check something. You want to refill your soda. You got to go to the bathroom. You just went, come back in, no problem. What did I miss? Okay, fine. Good. With Endgame, I'm 100% convinced that the reason more people are not complaining, and by the way, I don't hear a lot of complaints about the runtime of Endgame. I'm just hearing a lot of people, being a little bit concerned about how am I going to handle this? Well, it's not that they're complaining about the length of Endgame. They're just a little bit nervous about how do I navigate this runtime as an audience member, right? And I'm 100% convinced is because the reason you're hearing more about that with this movie than others is because, Rob, like you pointed out, this is a culmination of a 22 film. Now, granted, they all haven't been one story. Ant-Man had very little to do with this, all that, but still, it's a 22 film journey we've been on, building over 10 years, and now into one of the most popular, dynamic, electrifying franchises in the movies today. Nobody wants to miss a second. And it doesn't help that Kevin Feige the other day in an interview said, because one of the interviewers asked Kevin Feige the other day, I'm sure you all heard this, he said, roughly what's the best part during this movie to run to the bathroom? He said, there's no good time to do that. There's no good. That's what Kevin Feige said. Thanks a lot, Kevin. So Kevin just basically let everybody knows there is no good time to miss a single second. And that's why, Rob, I've been pushing back against people saying, why is everybody complaining about the runtime? They're not complaining about the runtime. It's just everybody's a little bit anxious about how are we going to deal with this? How are we going to navigate this? Nobody's saying they should have cut 20 minutes out of this movie. For the most part, everybody's fine with the runtime. It's just about how do we deal with it? And why weren't they as anxious with other films? Because we didn't care as much. People don't want to get up and leave and miss 30 seconds, a minute and 30 seconds of this movie. Nobody wants to do that. And I think the discussion around this whole thing and about should we reintroduce intermissions again. I've been getting more emails from more of our viewers from other countries saying, hey, we do intermissions all the time. It's great, but whatever. Is because we are so enthusiastic about this movie. That's why these discussions are happening, is because we're enthusiastic about this movie, because people are excited about this movie. That's why we're hearing people talk about this. Rob, how do you attribute this? Number one, I mean, do you remember nobody ever complaining about runtimes in movies before? And why do you think this particular 3-hour movie is bringing up more discussion than, say, maybe some others have?
Well, I think a lot of it might have to do with the fact that there's a lot of younger viewers that weren't even moviegoers when Return of the King came out. You've got a lot of the people that are bitching and moaning and complaining about this stuff. It's like, it's so funny to me that everybody expects things to be the way they want them to be as opposed to how they really are.
That's what we people do.
I've always said the world is never going to be the way you want it to be. The world is the way it is, and it's your job to go out into the world and take it on face value. And if you want to make the world and bend it to your will, you can try that and become a captain of industry. But it's like this movie. This movie's 3 hours and 2 minutes. It's not the movie's job to make you feel more comfortable. That's not the way of the world. That's not the way of the universe. The universe is indifferent to your suffering and your ideas and even about you. And all I care about is that this movie exists. I will do whatever I have to do to make myself enjoy it the most. And I'm lucky that the first time I see it is at a press screening where there is no soda available and there will be no popcorn. And my entire energies and focus, I mean, I will drink lots of water beforehand and take a very long trip to the bathroom and empty myself. And so I only go in with my spirit and an empty gullet because I want to drink in every minute of this film. I don't want anyone even in my row to get up. I'll shoot them a sideways glance. Nobody should get up in this movie.
But they will, because people need to. And look, one of the true unfortunate things, again, not a complaint about the runtime, but it is an unfortunate thing. One of the unfortunate things is, like, look, for somebody like me, for example, part of my routine, part of my tradition, part of my movie-going habits is I love getting to the movies. I love getting a big soda. I love getting a popcorn, even though I never eat popcorn. But when I go to the movies, I got to have that big soda. I got to have the popcorn. It's just part of my movie ritual.
I agree.
But now people like us got to make a choice, right? We got to go, hey, one of the things that we really enjoy about going to the movies, we can't do. Or we can do it, and we just got to accept that we're going to have to miss a 2 minute or a minute and 30 seconds of the movie, which really In a 182-minute movie, missing a minute and a half is not the end of the world. But there are going to be more people than normal in a regular screen. They're going to be getting up and walking in front of us to go to the bathroom. That is just where the reality. And just like people like me have to accept that I may have to make a decision to either miss a minute and a half or give up, part of my routine, which is having my soda, my popcorn, part of my movie ritual. I think other people are just going to have to accept, hey, I'm just going to have to accept that in a movie this long, that there are going to be a little bit more than normal times that people are going to be getting up and walking in front of me to go to the bathroom and stuff like that. It's just going to be a little bit more. And I think that's just a little bit of the trade-off that we're going to have to accept. I think all of us are going to have to accept to some degree when a movie's this long that to get these 3 hours of goodness, there's a little bit of a price tag. Maybe that price tag is you let your bladder burst. Maybe part of that price tag is more people are going to be getting up and down or maybe checking their phones or whatever. Part of that price tag is maybe you take a pass on having some popcorn and soda on this movie. But there is a little bit of a price tag for everybody to pay. The question is it worth it? I think the answer is obviously yes. It's at the end of the day, it's going to be worth it. It's just, it's unfortunate that we're going to have to put up with that. But woo, how worth it is it going to be? Less than 2 weeks, ladies and gentlemen, less than 2 weeks, and we will know the answer. All right, guys, with all that down and out of the way, we like to take some time here on the John Campea Show and take your live questions. And you guys have been firing in, well, a hell of a lot of live questions on the chat board here. So let's not waste any time. Let's go right to it. Ashley, what are people talking about and asking about in the live chat board?
All right. First one is from Tyler Yeats. Watched Infinity War again, and I noticed at the end when they show Thanos on the other planet, his Scarecrow armor is already up.
Yeah, but I don't know how much time has passed there. You know what I'm saying? That's the thing about that. I don't know if that's immediately. I don't know if there was a bit of a time jump there. So I'm just kind of at the point where I'm not ready to read anything into that just yet. All right, what's next?
Tyler again. Also, do you think there will be a Harry Potter episode of Best Worst Movie Podcast?
I don't think that Cody Miller will allow us to not have an episode of Harry Potter, because you got to understand Cody, who's of course mine and Robert's co-host on Best Movie, Worst Movie. What Star Wars is to me, Harry Potter is to him. I mean, he is a diehard Star Wars or Harry Potter fanatic. So yes, there will absolutely be a Harry Potter. Do you know which one you're going to pick in your head, Rob, without saying it, when we do a Harry Potter episode?
No.
Yeah. I think I do, but I'll save that one till we do it. All right, what's next?
Jay Bling, which Star Wars faction has the larger overall galactic influence and occupation, the Empire or First Order? I would say the Empire.
No question it's the Empire. They had decades and decades and decades to establish themselves and spread out and grow. First Order still kind of establishing themselves, so I would say that. Rob, would you say it any differently?
The Empire was awesome. The First Order are a bunch of chumps.
With big guns. Chumps with big guns. All right, what's next?
Samuel Pole, prediction: when the Fox broadcast network's current orders of shows like Simpsons and Family Guy are up for renewal, Fox Television, owned by Disney, will pull them from air to streaming exclusivity. Exclusively, sorry.
I think, look, we know that the Simpsons library is going on there. Family Guy is probably not going to have its library on Disney Plus. I'm guessing they might move that to Hulu because it's a little more mature. I honestly, I can see where you're coming from on that. I really do. I can see where you're coming from with that, Samuel, and why you would suspect that. It makes sense in one way. I don't think they're going to do that, though. I think they're going to let these shows finish out whatever the rest of their lives are. With The Simpsons, maybe it's 2 or 3 more seasons. Maybe the same with Family Guy, and then they'll just put their libraries up. I don't see them running in perpetuity on one of those networks. So, I mean, look, they still have a business interest in this network, and they'll probably keep it going. I don't know, Rob, how do you think they're going to handle that?
Well, again, it's rough, but I can see that the times they are a-changing. And look, no one, I don't know how much you talked about this over the weekend, but $6.99 a month, who's not going to sign up for that service? And
yeah,
like you just pointed out, having the entire, I think it's a good bet that new seasons will only be streaming. I mean, they'll want to phase out the Fox networks, the TV networks, because there's no reason to. The world is changing, and networks are going to be going away. It's all going to eventually be streaming. We're just moving into a new world. Things are changing, and I think it makes sense. And they've priced it, they've made it so attractive with that price point, and everyone's like, oh, they're just going to get us realists in and then jerk up the price. Maybe, but I think the amount of people that they're going to get to stay with this, it's going to be very, very lucrative for them, and they're going to keep adding things. And I could see it going stuff like these old school shows that have been around for a long time. New seasons will be streaming only, because why not? It ain't show friends, it's show business.
All right, what's next?
Jerome Smith, UFC 236 co-main and main event fights of the year.
They were insane. It was absolutely ridiculously insane. A couple of the best fights I had ever seen. Both the Style Bender and Gastelum fight was everything you would have hoped it would have been. The Max Holloway Poirier fight was maybe even better. It was crazy, crazy stuff. Great time to be a UFC fight fan. All right, what's next?
Alejandro, it's crazy how we've only seen about 5 to 10% of A4.
Yeah, I mean, it might even be less than that. I mean, we really, because more than normal, a lot of the trailers and footage we've seen, Rob, have been even more just repeat footage we've seen from previous trailers with a few extra little things added in. They have really done a good job of limiting the amount of stuff we've seen out of this movie. I'm expecting a lot of surprises when we go see this movie. A lot of surprises. All right, what's next?
Jay Bling, did you know that the directors of that Owen Wilson comedy, You, Me, and Dupree, have a movie coming out soon? Really excited for it.
I did not. Rob, are you familiar with that?
No, but I like that film, so I would like to see the movie.
All right, what's next?
Jordan Solis, Jordan or LeBron?
If you're to ask me today, Jordan. Let's see what LeBron does with the last couple of years of his career. LeBron can surpass Jordan. He can. Willie? Who knows? That's totally up in the air. But right now, if you had to just say today, I'll go Jordan. All right, what's next?
DC Patience, what if the TIE fighter pilot is a woman? Do you think it could be Kerry Russell's character?
You know, Rob, one of the things I was saying about the trailer was, why did you only show us the hands of the person in that TIE fighter? I mean, if it's Kylo, you show Kylo in other parts of the trailer, so what's the big secret? So it brings up two possibilities. Either number one, that's just a training exercise we see her doing, because the other question is, why is the TIE fighter heading right for her and not shooting at her? But anyway, or it could be a character reveal. Maybe it is a Kerry Russell character. What would you put your money on right now?
I think it's definitely a misdirect for us, but I wondered, no firing.
What do you mean
there.
misdirect? You don't think that scene's in the movie?
Oh, no. The person who's flying, we're supposed to assume it's Kylo Ren, but it's probably not. And I think, isn't that interesting? And the fact that they're not firing at her, and she is doing something where, I mean, it was just, I thought the whole scene was interesting. It was redolent, by the way. It harked back to the crop dusting scene in Hitchcock's North by Northwest, which I thought was kind of cool. But I thought it was neat. I mean, they spent half the trailer on it, so it was interesting. And I thought that it isn't what we're supposed to think it is.
And yet in but the problem is, of course, the difference in North by Northwest, he doesn't then grit down and do a back flying leap over the plane.
Right, no, he has no Jedi powers.
Little bit of a difference there. All right, what's next?
Eli Gray, Danny, a jerk. Brother sold her to Drogo, who took her. Allies betrayed her. Son and dragon got killed. She selflessly saved John and freed slaves. She wants the best regardless if John gets the throne.
None of that matters. I can run you down a big laundry list of all the terrible, awful, tragic things that has happened to Cersei. Cersei's had a lot of horrible, terrible things. How about every one of her children are dead? How about that? And all the terrible in the flashbacks when she was younger and all the horrible things that have happened to her. Sure. Look, again, I think Danny, in the terms of good guy or bad guy, Daenerys is a good guy. She's a good guy. Doesn't change the fact that she's a jerk, though. I think she's an absolute jerk face. I don't know, Rob. Am I overplaying that? What do you think? Am I giving Daenerys a little bit too hard of a time?
No, I think that Daenerys has tried to do good. Yeah. But the problem is frequently her choices have not always been the greatest, and she's also not taken the counsel of everyone who's come to her and said, she's carved her own way. But again, we'll see. Cersei grew up in a world. I mean, she was a very smart woman growing up in a man's world and has had to navigate all of and she came out on top. All of the men in her life, even Robert Baratheon, remember, was killed by a pig. Yeah. I mean, Cersei is smarter than the men on the show. Unfortunately, like Michael Corleone in the Godfather saga, she's lost her soul. She is a soulless monster whose life has battered her down, and as smart as she is and as cunning as she is, she will lose because she has no soul.
All right, what's next?
Willow Yang, whose secrets are the most valuable? Endgame, Game of Thrones, or Star Wars 9?
Look, there's only so many outcomes for Game of Thrones. I mean, really, at the end of it, there's really only so many outcomes, and we know what all those potential outcomes are. With something like Endgame, we don't even know all the potential outcomes. We don't even know. We have some theories of our own, but there could be a million things that we have not even considered yet.
Doctor Strange said just that.
Yeah, 14 million, as a matter of fact. Star Wars as well. Like, they're going to take a bit of a hiatus after this one is done. So how they're going to wrap this up, where does Palpatine play in all this? So I'll put both Star Wars and Endgame ahead of Game of Thrones as far as, pardon me, the importance of the secrets. It's hard to say. I mean, right now, we're 2 weeks away from Endgame, so my gut reaction is to say Endgame, because we're just 2 weeks away from it. But again, with Endgame, we already know Spider-Man Far From Home is coming in 2 months. So so I don't know, Rob, which one do you think has the more important secrets to keep right now?
Well, just because of the length of those secrets that have to keep, I would say episode 9, because we don't get that till December. In 5 weeks, Thrones will be revealed. All the whatever questions we have about Thrones will be revealed, and that'll be weeks after we know the answers to Endgame. So I would say the most valuable secrets now are, I mean, episode 9, you've got over 40 years saga coming to a close, and let's hope they stick the landing. I'm sure they have a lot of really interesting things happening there. But so I would say that just because those secrets are going to last longer, the episode 9, I mean, that trailer certainly intrigued me, and it told us nothing about the story. Yeah. So I'm curious. I think episode 9 is where it's at, only because we're getting the answers that we want. Even last night we got some more answers, and we're going to get, like, in a week. Yeah. In a week, in literally a week, you, my friend, I'm jealous as hell, will know all of the secrets behind Endgame.
Well, all right. What's next?
Alir, did you ever fully understand the Matrix Trilogy?
Well, I think there was a lot of people who think they understand it, but that's the thing. We all think we understand it, and maybe we don't. So I think I understand it, but they're probably off on a few things, especially when it comes to the architect. I mean, that you could sit down and do an entire master's thesis on just the architect's big, dialogue spew that he did with Neo, right? I mean, so this whole episode. But yes, I do believe I have a handle on the Matrix. Rob, do you?
A little bit. I love reading the Matrix Trilogy reassessed, because when it came out, that's another trilogy that we're talking 2003. It was back in the day now. I believe the Matrix, either one of them came out the same year as Return of the King. I'm not sure which one, but I think we've had time to digest. And once you have history, I think the Matrix Trilogy is a lot better looking back on it now than it was at the time, because it wasn't what we wanted or expected. But going back, and I love reading articles and watching YouTube videos about the Matrix Trilogy reassessed, and everybody's read all this great stuff into it, and it's become better over time. But I don't know if I still quite understand all of the monologues that the architect says. I don't know.
There's some complicated stuff there. All right, what's next?
Mark Fairley, what we know about The Mandalorian sounds intriguing. So excited to see Carl Weathers again. Dylan, you son of a bitch. Hashtag 80s epic bro handshake.
Yeah, not even really a handshake. It was the forearm to forearm handshake. The most epic bro handshake in the history of movies right there. And look, yeah, seeing Carl Weathers, like Rob, as you already kind of pointed out, seeing Carl Weathers in there is just a big bonus to me.
And he looks great.
He looks wonderful.
He looks like really, such a badass.
And then, of course, there are other people involved in here as well. You look at the list of directors that they have working on this thing. It's an impressive thing. I think we're in for a real treat. All right, what's next?
Eric Flynn, I would hate for this to be the case, but could Rise of Skywalker retcon Palpatine as a Skywalker, and these 9 films have been his story?
No, that's from everything we understand about Palpatine and everything that's in canon about him, that is simply not the case. So I don't see any possibility of that. Rob, do you?
No.
Yeah.
I mean,
so
Palpatine's a prime mover, but he's not the focus of the story.
Yeah. So Eric, I think you're safe, buddy. I think you're safe. All right. What's next?
John Demoto, are you surprised by Marvel's decision to hold back reviews for Endgame until April 23rd? Guess they don't want spoilers getting out.
No, they did the same basic thing with Infinity War as well.
Yep.
I mean, look, Marvel's pattern is they have supreme confidence in their movies. They lift reactions like weeks in advance and all this kind of stuff. But with Infinity War, and once we saw Infinity War, then we all understood. We understood why. And I think once we see Endgame, we'll understand why as well. So no, I have absolutely no surprise that they're holding off the reviews until the 23rd, especially when you get some outlets that even in their regular reviews, they put massive spoilers. We all know who I'm talking about, but hopefully they'll correct that this time. So really, no, not surprised at all. And I think it's probably a good move on their part. And look, it's the Tuesday. Movie opens on the Friday. It's still 3 days out. Well, really, it opens on Thursday, so it's still 2 days out. We're all going to hear in plenty of time whether this movie's any good or not. But these are films that are an exception to that rule of when a studio doesn't lift a review embargo until just a day or two before the movie comes out. That's a red flag. These films are exceptions to that, as I suspect will be for Star Wars Episode 9. But that's how I see it. Rob, do you see that any differently?
No, I see it just the way you saw it. Look, a review embargo in this case is strictly because of spoilers.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember when Endgame came out, I saw it just like you. There was the premiere, and then the day after were the press screenings. I went to the press screening, 3 o'clock. They lifted the embargo the day after the premiere, and people had spoiled it by 3:10. I'm not going to say it was, but there was one reviewer in particular that said that the movie ended on a cliffhanger, which one I objected to, and two, why would you say that?
Because it's not a cliffhanger. Yeah.
Right, I'm like, why would you say that anyway? Why would you set people up to know? I mean, why not? Anyway, yes, it's just because they want to protect the movie-going audience, and I respect them for it.
All right, let's move on. What's next?
Jake Harden, love the show. One of the highlights of my evening.
Oh, thank you so much, Jake. I appreciate that, man. All right, what's next?
DC Patience, best books, movies to catch up on Star Wars lore.
Oh, I am actually, as a hardcore Star Wars fan, I'm not a huge advocate of Star Wars external material, oddly enough. A lot of it has been pure crap. Some of it's been genius, but a lot of it's been terrible, and a whole bunch of it has been somewhere in between the two. I don't know that there's anything outside the movies you need to watch or read or look at to get really caught up on where we're at. Other than, obviously, you know, The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. If you really just want to get caught up for this movie, those are the two things to watch. I honestly, and there's some good books to read, but nothing that's really important that you read in order to lead into this. Rob, do you have any other answer to that?
Well, you know, I would take a different tact. I think a lot of the reference books that have come out, like the visual dictionaries.
Yeah, those are pretty fun.
There's so much cool backstory woven into those books. I mean, the people that write them, and you learn a lot about the mythology when they show various things. And because the books are not really canonical, some of the new expanded universe books in the wake of Force Awakens have told you a lot of things. But I found the visual dictionaries, and they're just so much fun to have. I have a lot of them, and they make them entertaining. They're visual, obviously, dictionaries, so they're fun to look at. You really get close-up looks at the vehicles and the characters, and they say where they're from and what they're doing and why they're doing it, and you get a lot of backstory about the universe, and they're cool books to own. I keep going back to them and flipping through, and the art of books as well, like the art of Force Awakens and the art of Last Jedi. Those books are packed with behind-the-scenes information.
All right, let's move on. What's next?
Edgar Navarro sends in a super chat.
Oh, thank you, Edgar.
Andrew Garfield, would you mind staying in your seat to Scarlet RDJ?
I don't understand what you're asking. Would you mind staying in your seat to Scarlet Robert Downey Jr.? Do you have any idea what he's talking about?
I am not quite sure there. It's a little truncated for this old brain to figure out.
All right. Sorry about that, Andrew. Okay, let's move on. What's next?
Edgar Navarro, love the show. Y'all are the best ever.
Oh, thank you, Edgar. Okay, let's move on.
Murray Reich, my brother after TLJ. I lost interest in Star Wars. My brother after trailer. Palpatine. Okay, I'm in. LOL.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, I thought the trailer was good. I thought it was solid. It did not blow me away. But the Emperor laughing at the end was the big sit up straight in your seat kind of moment that was exciting. I'll be honest, I'm a little bit surprised how enthusiastic a lot of people seem to be about it, because like I said, I thought it was good. Solid first trailer for a movie that doesn't come out for 8 more months. But I was a little surprised to see just how, like Murray's brother is talking about, I was surprised to see just how enthusiastic people have been. Have you seen the same thing, Rob?
Yeah, everyone's really enthusiastic, but I think that's the Star Wars narcotic effect. The things that get me interested about a trailer is when you get a sense of character and story. Just seeing imagery has become something that doesn't work on me anymore, because I've seen trailers with lots of imagery that turn out not to deliver the goods. What I want to see is give me a line of dialogue. You know, give me, and what we got, I mean, I loved seeing Lando smiling, flying the Falcon. I loved hearing the Emperor cackling, because it's character moments, you know. I mean, even though the Lando thing was visual, seeing that Lando, that Billy D. Williams smile, you know, that was, I love that. So, you know, but just all these images of people turning their heads and being on vehicles, I'm like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah, but again, it's a movie that's coming out in 8 months, so they weren't going to give us much more than that. All right, what's next?
Hey, Murray again. Since Luke wanted the Jedi Order to end, I guess the new era of Force users are called Skywalkers, which that may be the interpretation of the title.
Yeah, that's one of the prominent theories, I think, right now, and it's one of the ones, Murray, that I'm kind of, I don't fully buy into any of them yet. I haven't kind of picked a side on this, but that is definitely one of the ones that has a lot of possibility to it, and I won't be surprised at all if that's the way it turns out to be. So I think you're onto something there. All right, what's next?
Bane Rayner, we know each other. He's a friend from work.
Oh, Thor Ragnarok, of course. That was one of the great moments, like a classic Taika Waititi moment. I really did like that line. All right, what's next?
HV39000, one of two. John, I agree with your arguments and why Rey is not a Skywalker, but here's why I now think they are making Rey a Skywalker after all. I've always thought the title of The Force Awakens was a direct reference to Rey, that the Force awakened in her, and the title of The Last Jedi, again, is a direct reference in Rey. She became The Last Jedi. Rise of the Skywalker may also be a reference to Rey.
Well, look, the reality is this. We know she's not a Skywalker. I mean, J.J. Abrams from the beginning establishes she's not a Skywalker. Daisy Ridley has said in several interviews that she was told from day one of being on set about what her parentage was, which was nobody significant. And Luke was the Last Jedi, because they kept referring to Luke as the Last Jedi. And then at the end of the movie says, I am not the Last Jedi. But the title reference was to him, because they kept referring to him as the Last Jedi will return, blah, 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 all that kind of nonsense. So, no, look, you could make something about the character. That doesn't make her a Skywalker, though. She doesn't need to be a Skywalker by blood in order to do that. And they've already established that she's not. And that's the right thing to do. I've always said right from The Force Awakens, it would be idiotic to make her a Skywalker, to continually shrink the universe, that everybody has to be somebody else's mother. I mean, it's a ridiculous notion to me, and I'm so glad they didn't fall into that. But again, I think one of the possible theories here is that what a lot of people are suggesting online is that she adopts the name of Skywalker. So let's say all the other theories are wrong, that the Force users become known as Skywalkers, blah, blah, blah. There is a possibility she adopts the name Skywalker. I'm totally open to that as well. But is she a bloodline Skywalker? No. No, she's not. Rob, how do you see that?
I see it the same way you do. And now that we've been discussing it today, I really do feel that the term Skywalker is going to supplant Jedi at the end of this movie because of what the Skywalker clan has contributed to the galaxy a long time ago, far, far away, because that's, that kid at the end of Last Jedi who grabs the broomstick, uses, I guess, his latent force powers. That's where I think it's going to go. And I like that idea. I think it's great. It's like when Blade was called a Daywalker.
Yeah. Yeah,
Force
I agree.
users will be Skywalkers.
Completely agree. All right, what's next?
The White Walkers. All right. Murray, I can't help but wonder if after the Last Jedi reaction, JJ is playing it safe by having nostalgia fan service, again, to please people like The Force Awakens. I'm down for it either way.
No, I think he's just going to tell the story he wants to tell. I think I think that's what he did with The Force Awakens in the first place. He certainly did kind of the same thing with Star Trek, visually, at least at any rate. And I think he did the same thing with The Force Awakens. I expected he would do the same heading into last year. I don't really think fan reaction or anything has anything to do with it. Again, any coach that listens to the fans is destined to be sitting with them next week. And I think the same thing can be said about filmmakers. So I don't really think that's part of it, because again, if that was the part of it, then it would be out of character with what he did in The Force Awakens. But that's what he did in The Force Awakens, and I don't think there's any reason to assume he would do anything too terribly different going in here. Let's see how that kind of manifests itself, though. All right, what's next?
Darklock 63. Everyone seems to be forgetting the rest of Cersei's fortune-telling, that she would be killed by her younger brother. As firstborn, that is either Jaime or Tyrion, one of them has to survive long enough to kill her.
Well, okay, here's the thing, Darklock, though. You're making the assumption that any prophecy that's given in the show has to 100% come to fruition. So that's one assumption right there. So let's play that out. If we're going to take that assumption that any prophecy that's given will turn out because it's absolutely 100% locked in stone truth, then yes, one of her brothers has to end up killing her. Now, they're separated by quite a distance right now, whereas Tyrion and Jaime are both in Winterfell. She's still back on the Iron Throne. So that kind of works it out. But Rob, if one of them, first of all, do you think she's going to die by one of their hands? And if so, which one do you think it's going to be?
Jaime. I mean, Jaime's Tyrion. Tyrion, it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't have any impact. I mean, Tyrion already killed his father. If Tyrion is truly a Lannister, but I think that it's going to be Jaime's going to have to kill Cersei, and it's not going to be easy for him. It's going to be horrible because she is, after all, the love of his life, for better or for worse, right or wrong. I mean, he does love her
and family, and
family, and it's going to be an epic moment. But again, Cersei is soulless. She's just as soulless as a White Walker. She's just inhabiting the palace in King's Landing. As a matter of fact, maybe she becomes the Night's Queen at the end. It would not surprise me if she winds up becoming the leader of the White Walkers and they go off somewhere. I don't know, because she's already there. She's already one of them. She just doesn't know it yet.
I think there's still a path to redemption for Cersei. I still think that. Now, I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying I think they still show small doses of glimmer of humanity in her from time to time. Often those glimmers are glimmers of pain. But I think there's still a possibility, although I wouldn't put money on it. The added dramatic impact, of course, if it's Jaime, and this is maybe why I think it might be Tyrion, Jaime would also be killing his own child if he did that. Because remember, she's pregnant, and she's pregnant with his kid right now. And if he were to kill her, he's not only killing her, he's killing his last child, because all of his other children are dead.
And that's his tragedy.
His child, his son nephew, his daughter niece, whatever it is she turns out to be. Whereas Tyrion, killing family members, old hat. I already did it. I killed our dad, whatever. So I don't know. A lot of possibilities there. Absolutely a lot of possibilities. Probably right.
A lot of Chinatown moments coming up. My sister, my brother, my aunt, my lover.
Yep. But I think you're right, Rob. I think at the end of the day, it'll probably be Jaime. I think you're probably right. I think it's probably going to be Jaime. All right. What's next?
Clay Woodley. John Wick 3 is projected to make 30 to 40 million in its opening weekend. Think it has a chance of 50 million?
I don't know. You got what a lot of people forget, as much as we all go crazy over John Wick has never been a box office juggernaut of a film franchise. Will this be any different? I don't know. I mean, it's certainly hit. Look, the dude is killing people with swords on motorcycles. That's all I need to see. I mean, I think the trailers for this have probably been the best trailers out of any of the John Wick franchise. Seeing two dogs in slow motion jumping over carts about to rip some fools' throats out. You got me right there.
Yep.
So I don't know. 50 is still a big number. I mean, the problem is when we talk about these comic book movies, we're talking about $120 million opening, $200 million opening, 250. We forget $50 million is a big opening for a lot of films. 50 might be out of reach, but it's possible. Rob, what do you think?
You know, it is the third film, and I think John Wick's audience has grown. It's like when Terminator 2 I mean, it's a long time ago, but Terminator 2 opened huge. Everybody was excited because everyone had seen Terminator on home video. It had developed an audience over time. And that's why Terminator 2 was the first $100 million movie that cost $100 million. I think John Wick 3 could open big because people have been watching John Wick incessantly and they love John Wick now. And this movie, like you pointed out, looks so kick-ass. So I think people are going to be hyped. I know it comes out the week of my birthday. I'm hyped.
Putting it into context, John Wick Chapter 1 made $88 million worldwide with a $14 million opening. John Wick Chapter 2 made $171 million worldwide on a $30 million opening. That's with all the hype of the first John Wick and everything. And I think most people kind of agree that the first John Wick was probably better than the second John Wick. I really like John Wick 2 a lot, but
me too.
I also kind of agree that I think John Wick Chapter 1 was a little bit better. Can it make that jump from 30? Because it took a $16 million jump from 1 to 2. Can it take a $20 million jump from 2 to 3? Was 2 good enough to get it to 50?
I think it can. I think it can.
I think it's possible. I think it's unlikely, but yeah, I think it's got a shot. It's got a shot. That why not? All right, what's next?
Game Space. If you could watch one, Endgame or Game of Thrones season 8 finale or finally.
That's easy for me. It's Endgame. Look, I like Game of Thrones very much. I'm a big fan of Game of Thrones, but like I said, I'm not the world's biggest Game of Thrones. Like I'm not a big Game of Thrones head. I'm not an Iron Thronist or anything like that. So for me, that's easy. It's Endgame. No question. All right, what's next?
Disagree. Spark the we need a plan of attack. I have a plan. Attack.
Oh, that sounds so familiar. I feel like do you recognize that one?
Sounds something like Leroy Jenkins would say.
It does.
Like a Baseballs or something.
Oh, this is one of those ones. Sometimes these quotes come out and they just stump me. This is one I feel like, oh, it's right on the tip of my tongue and I can't pull it out. All right, what's next?
Ben Jesus did a doubleheader last night with Pet Sematary and Hellboy. Pet Sematary isn't as good as people say it is, and Hellboy isn't as bad as people say it is. Both movies disappoint me, unfortunately.
Yeah, you know what? I got to agree about Hellboy. It was disappointing, but I don't think Hellboy was a good movie. But it wasn't the unabashed. I don't find it to be the unabashed train wreck that a lot of other people said it was. I actually thought it had enough fun elements to make it almost good. It's not good, but it's almost good. So whatever. And I still haven't had a chance to see Pet Sematary. I've just been so busy. I haven't had a chance to see Pet Sematary yet. But yeah, Rob, haven't had a chance. Yeah, I know you were in Seattle celebrating your mom's birthday. So I don't think you had a chance to see Hellboy yet.
I've been following all the behind the scenes controversy, and it seemed like the producers really undercut what Neil Marshall was doing. But you know what no one's talking about is the science fiction film High Life. That
I can't wait to see that.
Claire Dennis, the director, made it, and I've heard incredible things about it. I think I'm going to try and go see it today or tomorrow. I really want to see that, even though it has nothing to do with the question that was asked.
Looks really good.
Yeah.
But yeah, but Ben, that is kind of what I felt as well. I didn't think Hellboy was as bad as people made out to be. Worth going to see it, I think, if you have A-list. Like if you have A-list or some movie passes and you get to go for free, I think it's worth the time to see it, but just keep your expectations in check. But David Harbour, fabulous Hellboy. David Harbour is a terrific Hellboy. It's just unfortunately they didn't build the movie around him that kind of to support that. All right, what's next?
Samuel Varg, I will finish what you started. Over under 50% that Kylo will be the one killing Palpatine.
It would fit. I mean, remember, he is dark side. He ain't Sith. And he's all about wiping out the Sith too. So I have no doubt that it is a strong possibility he's the one to take out Palpatine at the end. I think there's probably a greater chance it's Luke or it's Ghost Luke or Phantom Luke or three-headed dog Luke. I don't know. Maybe it's that. But yeah, I think Kylo is definitely a possibility in there. All right, what's next?
Anthony DeRizzo, Arya, how did you survive a knife to the heart? John, I didn't. Best exchange of the episode, in my opinion. Love the show and proud of Sophia.
Thank you so much for that, Anthony. And yeah, I agree. That confrontation or reunion, if you will, between Arya and John, one of the highlights of the show. Absolutely. Because it was warm, but at the same time, drawing their lines a little bit. It's like, come on, Sansa thinks she's smarter than everybody. Sansa's the smartest person I know, and she's trying to defend her family. Are you like? So it was both warm and confrontational at the same time. It was a brilliant reunion. I absolutely love that scene, Anthony. All right, what's next?
So good. Now she's a crazy assassin and he's a zombie. Their family's really.
I love when he asked her, "Have you used it?" And she's like, "Once or twice." I love that line. That was fantastic.
Yeah, it was a great scene. DC Patience, Mandalorian looks awesome. So excited.
Oh, absolutely. It looks awesome. I cannot wait to see this thing, especially the talent behind the camera. When you're talking about Taika Waititi, Jon Favreau is the showrunner, Carrie, I always mispronounce Fayuma. I always mispronounce Carrie's last name. Whether you're talking about like Dave Filoni, whatever, the talent behind the camera is so impressive. I cannot wait to see this thing. All right, what's next?
John Harrison, theory for you, John. Could Kylo Ren be a clone of Ben Solo? And the reason Rey is going to the wreckage is to find Ben, and the Emperor guides her there.
No, I don't think that's possible. I don't. If there's any cloning stuff, and I'm not convinced there is, if there's any cloning stuff, it'll just be confined to the Emperor inhabiting a clone. But I even don't think that's going to happen. So no, I think we're pretty safe on that. I don't think we're going to find out that Kylo Ren is a clone of Ben Kenobi. That's something his mother would have sensed. That's something Luke would have sensed, and they didn't. So I really don't think that's a possibility. All right, what's next?
Okay, Major, I can just see it now. Forced goes to Obi-Wan, Yoda, and Anakin having a cup of joe. All of a sudden, Palpy shows up and live in the flesh. Obi and Yoda look at Anakin. Yoda, one job to do. You had one, Obi. Facepalm Luke. Damn it, Dad.
Yeah, it would be kind of interesting to see the Force Ghost's reaction to a living Palpatine. Although if Palpatine just straight up survived the crash, he survived the fall, why not? Darth Maul survived getting cut in half and tossed down a big chasm. So if he survived that and survived the explosion of the Death Star and survived the wreckage crashing on some other planet and has spent the last number of decades just recovering, shouldn't a Yoda mention something about it? I mean, I don't know. Let me ask you this, Rob. Do you think Palpatine is clearly going to have a presence in this movie? That's obvious. Did he survive the events of The Last Jedi? Has he returned in some way, shape, or form? Is he a clone of his former self now inhabiting? What do you think they're going to do manifesting the return of Palpatine?
Well, the way I look at it, like if you've ever read the Dark Horse series Dark Empire, which came out at the same time the Thrawn trilogy came out back in the early 90s, there was an idea that the Emperor had many clones of himself, which makes sense in the Star Wars lore. We have a whole clone army. The fact that Palpatine's not going to bank, he was getting older. I think Palpatine's plan always was going to be that he was going to transfer his essence into a number of bodies and become immortal. You know, he was just, in a way, by staying in his old self, he allows people to sort of, when he was Chancellor Palpatine, people would, he's an old guy. You know, no one would believe he was a Sith Lord behind the scenes pulling the strings until he was, of course, accosted by the Jedi and he was physically damaged the way he was. But I think that it was always his plan to have clone bodies. And what if he comes back and he's not the old cackling? I mean, we have to have McDiarmid playing him, but what if Snoke was one of his clone bodies? Who knows? I don't know. But I think that I think it's he either survived the fall or he's been cloning himself and biding his time, and he's the real boss of the First Order. He's been behind it from the beginning.
All right, let's move on. What's next?
James Welsh, with missing link bombing, is Leica in trouble?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of predicted it would really underperform. I mean, the trailers did nothing, and I like Leica, and I like their films, but there was nothing about these trailers that got me even remotely interested. I didn't sound like anybody was buzzing about it. And the thing is, this isn't Disney. This isn't Warner Brothers. This isn't Universal with Comcast behind. This is a smaller company. This could hurt them. In what ways? Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. But it's certainly not a good day over at their offices right now. Not at all. All right, what's next?
Doug Harris, Rey's a Skywalker and Luke needs to be resurrected.
Rey's not a Skywalker. JJ's already established that a long time ago. But you guys got to stop getting my hopes up about Luke coming back physically. I've been trying to, I've been holding on to this 5% chance that Luke's still alive, but really 95% chance he's not alive. You guys got to stop giving me this false hope, because it's just going to upset me so much when he doesn't come back. All right. Last two questions of the day. What are our final two questions today?
Johnny 5, I initially thought the rise of Anakin saga begins and ends with him, but I like the rise of Rey better. Her being given that name makes more sense.
I mean, I don't think it makes more sense. I think it does make more sense that you bring it full circle as a completed saga, especially with the return of the Emperor being the one who caused the existence of Anakin in the first place. I think that makes more sense. However, I do think Rey adopting the name of Skywalker is also something that makes sense. Considering her, who really first show her how to tap into the Force, then of course being with Leia for however many years that transpired between the end of episode 8 and the beginning of episode 9, her taking on the name Skywalker to carry it on, that also makes sense. I don't necessarily think either of them are happening, but Rob, what do you think makes more sense?
It's a very specific use of the word Skywalker in the title.
Yeah.
And I believe that Skywalker becomes a symbol. It's not about an individual, it's more of a symbol. And in that sense, maybe it's Rey who actually comes up with that idea. She says, I am a Skywalker, we are all Skywalkers. Like in Spartacus. I am Spartacus. Everybody stands up. I mean, I think it's definitely along those
Spartacus.
lines.
Yeah, yes, like I said, and like our mutual friend Kevin Rubio pointed out to me as we were talking about this, the one thing that really gives more credence to that is the fact that in the earliest drafts, that's what George Lucas referred to Force users as. Skywalkers.
And we know JJ consulted George when they were doing the script for this. So
it's a good possibility. We'll have to wait and see. All right. Final question of the day. And then, guys, for everybody from Anthony R., Ben Gundam, Stubble McShave, and everybody on down, do not worry. We will get to your questions later today in a companion video. I will make sure every question that got sent in will be answered today in a companion video. Just keep your eyes open for that later in the day. All right, with that said, what's the final question today, Ashley?
Sean Zimney, have to share this. A couple weeks ago, the Fargo Film Festival brought in Richard Edlund, a multiple Oscar-winning visual effects supervisor who worked little movies like Star Wars, ROTJ, Die Hard, Ghostbusters, and more. I attended a class where he spoke about how he and George Lucas came up with the iconic opening shot of A New Hope. I'm just some lucky-ass nerdy college kid.
And again, whenever you get to go to a panel or be in a class or be at a presentation where one of these iconic figures who have worked on these long enduring, incredibly magnificent pieces of art, it's always just a huge thrill. I remember the first time I got to meet John Knoll. And a lot of you may not recognize the name of John Knoll. He and his brother basically kind of created Photoshop. But then he also kind of became, when it came time to the prequels eras, he was the head visual effects supervisor for Lucasfilm. He was the head guy there, I should say at Industrial Light and Magic. And then he was the guy who came up with the idea for Rogue One and went and pitched the idea for Rogue One to Kathleen Kennedy. And I love Rogue One. But I remember the first time I had a chance, because I was working in the visual effects industry at the time, when I got to meet John Knoll, it was all I can imagine. It's like a musician meeting Elvis. That's how I felt. I felt like a musician meeting Elvis. Mm-hmm. I was just in awe. I couldn't believe I was talking to this guy. It's amazing. And whenever you get to have these types of experiences, Sean, it's just real special. Rob, I know you've had several of those experiences. Are there any that really stand out to you?
Well, you know, I got to meet, in terms of visual effects artists, Mark Stetson worked on, he was the visual effects supervisor for Superman Returns, but he also helped build the model of the Enterprise for Star Trek The Motion Picture, and in the model department, and you know, I got to geek out with him, and I've met so many of these guys, effects dudes, and when you meet people that work on these iconic moments like that, it's just Greg Jean, who's one of the nicest, quietest men, but he built models for Close Encounters. He's built countless models for Star Trek. I mean, I got to meet him and just talking to these guys about what they made. I mean, for them, they were doing their jobs, you know, and then when they were working on these things, they weren't the iconic memories that we carry around with us now. They were just doing what they were supposed to do, but they didn't know usually what was going to happen with their creations. And now years later, they understand after meeting idiots like me going, tell me all about it. But they're always tickled, and they always are so warm, and they will share these memories. And it's always great to meet people like that. I mean,
you sound like a Murloc there from World of Warcraft for a second. That was actually a really good one.
That was
all right,
Ghibli,
guys.
John. That was Ghibli.
That was very Ghibli. All right, guys, that will do it for today's installment of the John Campea Show. Thank you so much for joining us. And once again, for everybody else who still had outstanding questions, do not worry. Those questions are getting answered in a companion video a little bit later today. I want to thank the people here joining me. First of all, Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett. Robert, where can people find you online?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at BurnettRM, find me on Instagram at RMBurnett, or find me on my own YouTube channel, The Burnettwork, and its companion website, theburnettwork.net.
And of course, also joining us, Miss Ashley Whelan. Ashley, where can people find you?
You guys can find me on my Instagram. It's my name, Ashley Whelan. There's 2 Y's in Ashley. Or my Twitter is Ashley1.
And you guys, of course, can follow me on social media at John Campea. Make sure you guys go visit the website, www.thejohncampeashow.com/contact, if you want to submit a topic or question to possibly want to be one of the main topics here on our show. That will do it for me for now, guys. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is John Campea, and until our next video, bye-bye.